Welcome to my video on the 2024 movie The Substance. Now, I'm going to start with a review that's going to contain zero spoilers, and then I get into what I call the thoughts section, where I discuss the movie in detail with a lot of spoilers, including for the ending. The movie is rated R, so will this video be, and there was a lot I loved about this movie. There's stuff where I don't know if it completely stuck the landing. Anyway, before I go any further, I'm doing this in honor of Women's History Month, and it is very important to me that you do not only listen to my voice, or any other man for that matter, on this movie. So I'm going to start by mentioning some videos that I learned a lot from that were made by female leftist YouTubers. So yes, that's going to be the start of this. So, Broe Deschanel's Hag Horror, Why Are We So Afraid of Old Women? Jordan Teresa's I Don't Know How to Feel About the Substance, 2024. Girl on Films, Hollywood Has a Scary Old Lady Problem. The Take, The 3 Reasons Aging is So Terrifying in Movies and TV, Trope Analysis. And, yeah, I think I will also say I quite appreciated. No, yeah, those are the ones that I It's been a while since I watched any of them. I'm gonna try not to restate anything they said there, and as usual, part of why I even make this video is because I know that there are cishet white men out there who refuse to listen to anyone who does not look like us cishet white men. This is a movie that there's so much here about misogyny, patriarchy, the beauty economy, and just please don't only listen to men talking about this. Every bit of analysis I do in these videos, where I talk about issues that are faced by minorities that I do not belong to, which is most of them, I base what I say on the lived experience and analysis of members of those minorities. There is a link in the description box to a, as of yet still incomplete, a document, Google Doc, with links to YouTubers that I've learned a lot from. Once again, please listen to them more than me. I want more people to watch this movie. It is imperfect, but there are certain things that it absolutely nails. And obviously, it is not primarily made for me. It is made, it is about, by, for, and about women. But I think there is a lot that we men can learn from it as well. And I don't know if I still need to say it, but just in case, there is not a single part in this movie where I felt like, oh, what, so we men just like suck or something. It is criticizing, patriarchy, show business. It's, none of the things that I thought were less than perfect about this movie have to do with negative depiction of men in the movie, or being confronted with the realities and some satire over these really shallow systems and worlds. I have given the following a lot of thought. I am going to mention some things, discuss some things about people's appearance in this video. I want to make it absolutely clear I don't judge anyone for their appearance, unless it's like, if you choose something, like if you get a Nazi tattoo, for example, or join ICE, something like that, I will judge you. That is 100% going to happen. but I don't judge people for their appearance outside of that. I bring it up because it is a big part of the movie, and not, the movie is not saying that it is that you are bad if you are not conventionally attractive. Now, I think that might cover the entire preamble. So, yeah, I am really going to keep it very vague. If you don't already know spoilers, oh, and by the way, the videos I mentioned earlier do contain spoilers. I think all of them contain spoilers for this movie. But yeah. Basically, the protagonist, Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, and I will discuss her casting, as well as that of Margaret Qualley's. The character of Elizabeth is, no longer young, and as such, despite the fact, and I think the movie does a really solid job of this, she's still capable of doing her job. Like, clearly, she's not actually, and it helps underline ageism. Like, that does start even before someone struggles. Like, I mean, I can appreciate once someone reaches an age, and to be clear, I'm also not going to engage in ageism in this video. When someone reaches an age where they simply can no longer do the thing that is expected for that job, one can appreciate that, I mean, under some cases, it is thankfully possible to simply, decrease the demands of that job. Like, I know there are a number of people who, once they reach a certain age, maybe they work fewer hours, for example. And I'm also not one of those people who say that you have to work until you fucking die, collapse at work. Do I look like I run Amazon? Hopefully not. But yeah, one can appreciate that there comes a time when you may no longer be able to carry out certain required aspects of a job, and at that point you may need something, and I'm a big believer in we need to take care of, basically, I think we should try to solve every problem that affects people that is at all possible, and I am talking about actual problems, like, everybody should have food, roof over their heads, people who can help them when they have problems, stuff like that. I'm not talking about, I know sometimes when, conservatives like to say, we got to solve this problem. Wink, and it's like fucking white supremacist dog whistle shit. So I'm not saying that once you reach a certain age, you should just suffer, or that you should suffer if you can't find a job for whatever reason. But I do think the movie does a really solid job of underlining she is still capable of doing her job. It's just that people no longer consider her sufficiently conventionally attractive. And that's another thing. And once again, I hope I don't sound shallow when I say this, but like, Demi Moore still looks great, and it really does just boil down to, well, she's no longer in her 20s. And that's enough for so much of Hollywood. So I really appreciate that they did cast, and specifically Demi Moore. There's a few other things I want to talk about before I talk about her casting specifically. But the fact that they did not cast a 20-something and then like put makeup on them to make them look around 50, Now, basically, Elizabeth, they are, it looks like she may no longer be able to have her job. And it's basically this sort of aerobics jazzercise kind of thing. And so there is something in the movie that suggests that maybe under certain circumstances she could look like the way she used to. And that's sort of that's something that the movie is about. And I think that's as much as I'm gonna... Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend like it ruined the movie that I already knew a lot about. I chose to watch the videos about, I wasn't sure when I was gonna be able to watch this movie, and, it was free on a streaming service that just requires a library login and limits you to 4 movies per month. Yeah, I do think, if you don't already know spoilers about this movie, hopefully by the end of this review, I'm going to have done my job to make sure you still don't know spoilers, and I would recommend going in not really knowing what happens. I will discuss, like, there are people for whom this movie is going to be too much, and there's no shame in that. So I'll try to give just enough detail by the end of the review that you'll know whether or not you'll be okay with this movie, because it is absolutely not like, yeah. So I really appreciated how this movie, it understands, in a time where so many major movies are terrified of repetition, this one understands that there is value in it. And I'm not talking about, to be clear, it never gets tedious, which is impressive because there is at least one character for whom some of this experience is exactly that. And it is difficult to get that across without replicating it in the audience. But it is never boring. And yeah. And I suppose it's also important for me to... I should expand on, when I say repetition, I do not mean that it is like a ripoff or something. It takes inspiration for sure. I will go into some of them in the spoiler section, but it is... When I use the word repetition here, which I'm starting to repeat too much, it's starting to get repetitive, what I mean is it will show the same angle and or image multiple times, and it can convey that a person is changing how they feel about something. It can convey contrast between different characters and situations, and it does this expertly. Like, this felt like the kind of movie you would see from decades past. I wish they still made more movies that were... not in all ways. In some ways, I'll discuss it in the spoiler section, but certainly some of the artistry here feels like, I am not the first person to say, there's some very distinct Kubrick inspiration here. I'm not making any excuses for him as a person. I appreciate that he did some really fucked up things. I am not saying we should forgive him for how he treated Shelley Duvall on the set of The Shining. Merely speaking of his... this video isn't even like positive about his... I'm just talking about his influence. So the psychological accuracy, this is one of those movies where there are parts that are more that this is what it feels like than what is happening. And that's another thing that I really appreciate. I think one of the themes, one of the things that Hollywood does a lot these days is this thing of like, oh, it has to be like extremely realistic. And I appreciate, as much as I love nearly all of the work of Christopher Nolan, I appreciate he has some part to play in that, because his movies, like, there are some elements that go beyond, but a lot of the time it's like very, very realistic, and I don't necessarily think it's to the detriment of those movies, except an argument could be made that the Batman movies he made could have been even better if he had gone more into, the comic book elements. But I really appreciate when we get something like this that is unafraid to, yeah. And it's one of those movies where it's not necessarily... right, and that was the other thing. There was two aspects of that. Another thing about the psychological accuracy is that it does a lot of the time feel like, yeah, this is how someone would behave in this circumstance. And some of it is exaggerated for effect, but it definitely does have a lot of empathy towards Elizabeth, and frustration, disdain, repulsion towards the men who created and maintained the system where a woman's value lies in her appearance, which is just such a... If anyone watching this video feels that that is an accurate statement rather than a horrifying... please work on that. There is so much more. Now, this is one of those movies where it stays true to itself, and it is not really trying to be authentic to reality, more the way that things would appear under certain circumstances. The level of detail is immense, and yet I really appreciate that there are certain things that are not explained in the slightest, because it would only take away from it. And I guess that more or less covers the overall writing. The dialogue is also really solid. I really appreciated how much, when men talk to women in this movie or about them behind their backs, it is focused on appearance rather than substance. And I do think it is purposeful that it's called substance, because, like, there are other words that could refer to a certain thing in this movie that is probably the direct thing that it is referring to, but yeah, it is also about, substance of people and the way we look at people. I am not yet familiar with the other... let's see. I think it is... If I remember correctly, I'm afraid my wrists are really fucking sore right now, so I'm not gonna look it up. But the writer-director here made one movie before this, and I think I might watch it at some point. Right now, I just don't have access to a copy. I did look, but both of these have been somewhat controversial, and they are, from what I understand, that one is also fiercely political, like this one is. And I refer you to, how well she does. Most of what so much has been said by the YouTubers that I mentioned earlier in the videos that I referred to. But she definitely has a very assured hand. She is, she was approaching 50 years old when she made this, which once again, I would not mention that if I did not think it relevant. But This places her very close in age to Elizabeth, and it is definitely a movie that would look extremely different if it had been made by someone much younger or even a little bit older. But yeah, it is very much a movie that does not hold back. Nothing feels like it is toned down for, especially like it is not trying to coddle the audience. It feels like it is screaming with righteous fury. And it manages to keep a strong focus throughout, and utilizing elements of cinematic language to really great effect, some of which I can't really give away. I'll discuss it in the thought section, but I would definitely say I appreciated the contrast between boredom and fun and something that is perhaps just no longer deemed appealing, and something that is currently considered very attractive. And I think that does bring us to, the cinematography. I was really impressed by how, so I already mentioned the fact that it will reuse angles, and it's hard for me to overstate how effective of an element that is here. There were times where I could hardly believe, I mean, this technically is the same angle. This is the same shot. The camera is moving in the same way. The lighting is genuinely spot on, Tish. Like, you could not dream of better lighting. That's, again, something, I don't know, I think I also need to watch more recent stuff, try to watch a decent amount of older stuff, but more recent stuff that is not like MCU, where, so much of the lighting and framing is just flat and uninspired. But I'm so glad that there still are filmmakers who have that degree of artistry. Like, genuinely, this feels like something made, back when, well, I guess to an extent, Hollywood has always been more profit than art oriented, which is one of the reasons why you should every so often dip out of, I've been rewatching some Andrei Tarkovsky recently, and it's not like I forgot how amazing he is, but it really does bear repeating. That is what you can make when you are not constrained by capitalism. And to be clear, I appreciate that there are people who manage to make something incredible under capitalism as well. Now, I also thought it worked really well that there are times where the camera does not actually move, but stays on the exact same thing for a while, and really gets a lot out of that. And the editing also, I really appreciated how certain scenes are really lingered on and allowed to, we're forced to sit with it, which I will acknowledge at times there is some misjudgment there. And then at other times something will, move very fast, which this is one of those movies where it is extremely important that it conveys how, there's that saying about time flies when you're having fun. Turns out time almost stands still if you are not. And that's, I'm not saying that that's necessarily news to anyone, but this is one of those movies that really, the contrast is extremely palpable here. And I also really appreciate, like, it feels like they really made sure there was nothing extraneous here. You know, I've mentioned that there's at least one element that I think is at least somewhat misjudged, but it does not really feel like they, by and large at least, you know, spend too long on any one thing. Like, I will admit there was one scene at least where I was thinking, where is this going? And then I would definitely say by the end of the movie, I understood. I got why certain things, yeah. And yeah, the production value is fantastic. This looks expensive. Nothing feels like they just had to cut corners. And the set design, locations, costumes, and makeup are all on point and really communicate things about the characters. You know, you see where, what it looks like where Elizabeth lives, in the place where she works, or at least used to work, and other things. And the set design is one of the places where you really see the Kubrick inspiration, and it is genuinely so powerful seeing these rooms. Some of the time there will only be one or two people in there, and the camera placement and set design, somehow it feels simultaneously claustrophobic and empty. That is not easy to do. And there is this sterility, and like, it's so off-putting. Like, you don't want to be in that place. And yet, does the character we're watching have a choice? Is this just what their life is now? And that's very difficult to do, whilst also not making these places feel inexpensive. It takes tremendous talent to make something feel simultaneously like it cost a lot, and I think it might have, and also just, yeah, really underline that, you know, because like in real life, money does not make you happy. And I appreciate that is one of those things. Obviously, we do all need money, and if not for late stage capitalism, a lot of people would be much more financially well off, but the rich keep insisting on becoming richer at the expense of the rest of us. And I guess so it's important for me to note, I have not watched, I might at some point, but I have not yet watched, I cannot believe I'm blanking on that title, The Great Gatsby. But I do hear that one problem with that movie is that it does not make the luxury look empty. And I probably don't even have to tell you this, but that is important for that story, you know. And I can absolutely imagine, because, you know, Baz Luhrmann, listen, I love some of his work. I thought he did a great job on Elvis, despite, listen, it's a flawed movie. It should confront the harsher elements. I so badly want to watch, at some point I will watch Priscilla, because I do hear that one does a much better job of exploring how it was for her. And I am really quite the fan of, I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. No, I'm sorry. It is just not coming to me. I'm so sorry. But she was amazing in Alien Romulus, Bad Times at the El Royale, and Civil War. I'm not making excuses for Civil War. I did an entire video talking about my issues with that one. But she's fantastic in it. And I will definitely watch Wake Up Dead Man as well. Now, I believe it's on Netflix. I don't have Netflix right now. At some point, I'll probably do at least 1 month and then watch a bunch of stuff on there. Anyway, the... shit, where was I? We were talking about the... Yeah, so it is... But yeah, Baz Luhrmann, you know, he does like to go big. Otherwise, he'd have to go home. And I have heard people straight up say he was not the right choice for Great Gatsby because of that particular aspect. So I'm really impressed by how well this one does. And it is also not easy to make Kubrickian visuals feel at home in a production. You know, Kubrick was good at that, but I have seen, I'm afraid I forget who, but I've seen at least some people try to emulate him, and they just couldn't quite get it. Yeah. Now, let's see, yeah. With location scouting, they also did a really great job with, like, there's at least one spot which is basically like this, you know, it's just like sidewalks and palm trees and such of you know, LA, and that is used to great effect. And there's also areas that look substantially less appealing, and also it does not always look appealing. At times it feels hostile. The way that this movie explores getting a lot of attention as a woman in this industry, in that city, yeah, really, really, city. Did I mention the state? Whatever. That area, you know, where if you are conventionally attractive, it can be fawning, but also sometimes creepy, but you are either invisible or hated if you are not conventionally attractive as a woman in that environment. And yeah, the costumes, I can't really mention too much of the major ones, but it really is, like, just incredible. And there is at least one element of makeup, which I really... it's going to take a while before that leaves my my mind. It's burned into my retina. The music is also really well done. Yeah, it always fits the kind of vibe they're going for, and I really appreciated this sort of mix of, like, at times it is, I don't know if I would say appealing, but it is getting across that this is a positive experience for the character in question. And then at other times, it is very unpleasant to listen to. It is a movie that is... It puts you through the ringer from, you know, both through the themes and the aesthetic decisions. The sound design, my God. This has some of the best sound design of a movie I've watched in years. Yeah. I will go into why in the spoiler section, but I absolutely cannot without giving too much away. So I don't think I want to give too much away about characters. I will just say that I appreciated that some don't at first appear to have depth, but over the course of it you realize they do. And then, you know, perhaps not everyone does have depth. And I was personally pretty happy with who they chose, you know, who did and did not have it. And I would be remiss if I did not mention character of Harvey. and you're probably there's some percentage chance that you already realized, and I'll go ahead and confirm, yes, he is clearly meant to be Harvey Weinstein. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but yeah, and they really do a great job of exploring, why Weinstein was so utterly horrendous. And I wish I could pretend like it ended with his ousting, but yeah, there are still major problems within, really show business in general. I don't know if Hollywood is even the worst, but and the I guess I'll go ahead and briefly recommend a more recent video than the other ones I mentioned. So if you haven't already watched, Emma Thorne did a video. It's not the first on Worth It or Woke, but it is a really solid one. And I'm afraid my wrists are too sore to look it up right now, but I believe it is called something along the lines of the worst and most offensive movie reviews online. And yeah, she does a really great job in that. And yeah, I thought they made some really great choices with the depiction of Harvey, because yeah, you'll wish that he was invisible like the imaginary rabbit. It's not a spoiler to say they sometimes place the camera, and I think it might also be one of those where they use a lens that's at least slightly distorted, or maybe it is just how close he is, but they get the camera so close to his face, perhaps especially his mouth. This is the camera in this movie loves and or hates people's mouths to great effect, because it is a really important, it's one of the first things you notice about another person, and his looks bad. And I appreciated that some of the times where it looks the worst is when he is talking about how Elizabeth is not sufficiently conventionally attractive anymore, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he is at least the same age, I would say probably older. And I'm not making excuses for, I'm afraid I forget the actor's name. I used to like him, but then he did that recent movie that you can probably already tell. I don't think I even have to mention the title, but that made it clear that politically he is not, aligned with myself. And that brings us to the other actors. So I don't yet know that much about Margaret Qualley. I suppose this might actually only be the second thing. I also watched, I've been meaning to watch more that she's in since she was a real standout in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I don't think that movie is amazing, but as usual, like, I don't think I've ever left a Tarantino movie, or that much of anyone has really, without at least one actor being like, I gotta watch more of their stuff, and I really appreciate that he does, for his faults, I do appreciate that he does that for ones who have yet to be discovered, yet to prove that there's that much to them as an actor, or ones who had a career and then, it stagnated, often through no fault of theirs, and he's able to, give them a boost. That's really great. But she really does nail it here, and I have seen some say that they thought this should have been, that the because there is a, it's not really a spoiler to say. Basically, Margaret is playing young Elizabeth, essentially. That's perhaps a slight oversimplification, but it's as much as I can say without spoiling. There are some who say that the role, at this point it doesn't really make sense to, they refer to her as Sue, Margaret's character. Sue, some say, should have been played by one of Demi Moore's, and I respectfully disagree, and others have, I have seen, feminist women analyze this movie and say that they do not feel that way. And some have said that Demi Moore's role should have been played by Margaret Qualley's mother, also an actress. And listen, I am this. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna sacrifice my wrist. Yeah, right. Crap. Where did I put? I know I have the link around here somewhere. I'll have it momentarily. I guarantee it. So the right. I get now that I am. Writer director of this is Corley Farge, I think is how you pronounce it. And these are the two movies that she has written and directed, and then she also directed some shorts, some TV stuff, and that sort of thing. Anyway, back to the so I'll just real quick. Dennis Quaid was the actor playing Harvey, and it really sucks. I like him in Frequency. Oh yeah, Inner Space. I actually kind of forgot that was him, but he played Ronald Reagan in the movie Reagan, and I despise Reagan. And from what I hear, it is a positive depiction of Ronald Reagan. So that's a choice. But the right. Margaret Qualley's. So let's see, her. It's gotta be in here. The oh, that's right. She is already a producer. That's really great. More actresses should be producers and directors once they feel that they. Her mother is Andie MacDowell, and she is still acting. She was phenomenal in Ready or Not. And, I like her a lot. I thought she was great in Groundhog Day, For Weddings and a Funeral. Oh, yeah, Michael. Oh, wow, it's been forever since I watched Michael. I didn't love that movie, but I thought she was really good in it. So hypothetically, they could have cast her. But, and this brings me into Demi Moore, part of what's going on here is the image of Demi Moore and how it has changed over the years. And for that, she is perfect. And Margaret Qualley, she is up and coming. And that's one of the reasons why, once again, obviously, I'm not saying it's like her first movie or something, but she is someone who is very popular right now, with good reason. She does really, really solid work. In both of these that I've watched, and I've heard really good things about other of her work. And something that Margaret is true of Margaret today and true of Demi, when Demi was a bigger star, is that one of the things that people notice, sometimes too much, is their conventionally attractive looks. And that is really important for this movie, and it uses male gaze clearly in a way to, it is not really saying, isn't it great when a woman looks like this? It's saying, this is what a lot of people want to see from women. And I'm not the right person, I'm, as a cis man, I am not the right person to judge whether it is right to use that, but I do just want to note that is very much like, it is clearly not accidental or just like there to get people to, like, you know, it's not Skinamax or something, you know. And part of how you see that is the contrast between the conventionally attractive and that which is not. And I really, really love Demi Moore. I have watched everything that I have been able to get my hands on of hers. Just, yeah. The, I think I'll go ahead and mention, yeah, so I'm afraid I was not able to rewatch all of them, but among the ones that I watched years ago and remember thinking she was great in, Disclosure, I'm not saying the movie's good, and A Few Good Men, and then we have the ones I rewatched, which are G.I. Jane and Ghost. And something that, you know, was very much the case in those two and is part of why she, you know, plays such a substantial role in this movie, in addition to her autobiography, which I understand is why Carolyn Farge, you know, cast her. Her work, Demi Moore's work, you know, back in the 90s, there was, okay, I should probably, yeah, I believe it is true of some of her other work at least, but I specifically, the ones I rewatched were, yeah. But yeah, you know, so those are the ones I can primarily comment on, but as mentioned, you know, I watched anything of hers that I could get my hands on, including, like, if I had heard, oh, you know, that's not like the best movie ever made kind of thing, like, yeah, watched anything of hers that I was able to, even St. Elmo's Fire. But yeah, the ones that, so yeah, Ghost and G.I. Jane, I noted that her physical appearance plays a role. The way that other characters feel about her conventionally attractive good looks, important to the, yeah, and it comments on how she is perceived by others, what men want when they see her, and which ones act on it, and if some of them maybe over time become, you know, are able to look past her appearance, and in the case of G.I. Jane, the fact that she's a woman in this traditionally masculine environment. This is not going to be a review of G.I. Jane. I am considering it. I guess I already mentioned, but I do own a copy. And I do think there are things to talk about it. But other than that, you know, they are political movies, and with G.I. Jane more so for her. I don't know if I want to go into what Ghost. I'm also considering doing Ghost at some point. But the yeah, you know, it is very clear that she was attracted to roles that had this exploration of issues that we left-wingers fight for. And I don't think I can even really give away what Ghost is exploring without spoiling something, so I won't. But it really is perfect for her to be in this. And yeah, she still knocks it out the park. There is so much to her performance here. And the I guess, yeah. So yeah, I hopefully have explained sufficiently why it is so perfect for her to be playing this role. And now, that's again, like, I'm so glad this movie was not made in the 90s with Demi Moore in, middle-aged makeup. And I think that's about what I can say about the acting and casting without giving too much. I guess I'll briefly note about the casting. Really appreciate a bunch of the men being really gross with women. They made sure to cast male actors who are not really conventionally attractive. And I've hopefully made it clear. I'm not like body shaming anyone. I'm not talking about like, I appreciate, that's something we actually kind of have to unlearn, because there is some chunk of it is definitely cultural, but there is some too, like if you show a baby, if they see someone who is conventionally attractive, they're more likely to find them appealing compared to someone who is not. It is something we have to unlearn. There is a biological element to it, and part of that is, of course, like for one thing, evolution is imperfect, but basically when someone is not conventionally attractive, it can be a sign that they have something wrong with them, and that thing might be contagious or otherwise make them, maybe there is something about them that means you should stay away from them. This does not mean that they should not get empathy and help, but I do really appreciate, because it is important for this movie, how many of these men genuinely just look so... Like, I mean, some of them is essentially just they're kind of average looking. But to see someone average looking talking about women who are not conventionally attractive or not sufficiently so, it just does hit different. And I'm not one of those people who say, if you aren't conventionally attractive, you can't criticize people who are also not conventionally attractive, because like, okay, but that, I understand where they're coming from. I get this thing of like, there's hypocrisy in that, but that kind of opens the door to, oh, well, if someone is conventionally attractive, they're allowed to criticize those who are not. Like, no, that's also not okay. Now, I think that does bring us to the special effects are fucking breathtaking, and I am afraid I cannot give any detail without spoiling, but just seriously, yeah. And yeah, the horror and such works really, really well. I can't really go into detail, but it genuinely was very effective. And yeah, so this is a good place to... I'll keep it vague, but I will say, if you find yourself asking the question, is this movie too graphic? Does it show something that I would be uncomfortable seeing? The answer is almost definitely yes. It goes hard. It is utterly, like, if it was a person, it would be violently shaking you, trying to get some sense into you. And that is as much as I can say. Yes. Yeah. I rate this 8 powerful explorations of superficiality out of 10. And that brings us to the thoughts section. So let's just see. Yeah. From here on out, excuse me, I am spoiling absolutely everything. And I think I will start with just the acknowledgement of... So I already meant, in some of the titles of YouTube videos that I recommended earlier, you have the term hagsploitation. And it is definitely, as others have noted, the movie does focus, it devotes time and strong cinematic language to, for a while it is Elizabeth who is, she's aging gracefully. But then when Sue starts taking advantage, it goes, the aging starts to accelerate. And then by the end, I don't think I want to use the descriptive term, but at the end we have, the character is given two names, or two words making up their name, and I will merely refer to them as Alyssa Sue. You already know the other word, and they are very... So once again, it is not that I cannot handle being shown something that is conventionally unattractive in my media. But, and again, this is something I have seen female feminists say as well, the way that it focuses on Alyssa Sue, we are invited to be grossed out by her more than, and the humiliation she suffers there at the end. I get what it, again, like I said in the review, it feels like the movie is like trying desperately to compel us to realize how bad this is, but it is also doing so by showing something that is conventionally unattractive, and they put tremendous effort into making it so. We are not talking about a few wrinkles here. And that... It's also important for me to note, I don't think that it is inherently wrong for a story like this to have a downer ending. There are other movies about Hollywood chewing people up and spitting them out that also have this sort of thing. And some of them also have an issue with, and that's something that is explored really well in some of the YouTube videos I mentioned. Some of them also have women who are aging and thus, no longer deemed conventionally attractive. And it's the fact that it goes so hard. Like, it ends like a monster movie, essentially. It is like this. They are actually, you have characters saying monster and kill the monster. This feels like the ending of, the movie starts with Harvey referencing King Kong to underline that he thinks Elizabeth is too old, and yeah, it feels like something out of a 30s or 50s monster movie, people horrified at what they're witnessing. And I appreciate that is definitely purposeful. Fargeau is saying, why do we treat women like monsters once they reach a certain age? But to do so, she is presenting us with a monster, one who doesn't even resemble, by the end, Alyssa Sue does not look, she doesn't still look human. She looks like a warped, version of, and that's, I appreciate, there is some The Fly and Portrait of Dorian Gray going on, and those do also have, that sort of thing, but there's just, it's I don't know. I think I have hopefully pretty much made clear yeah, they could have gotten the message. Fargeau could have gotten the message across without presenting us with something like that. I honestly think if the movie had simply ended with, Sue gets up on stage and then suddenly she morphs into, Elizabeth, and then they react, perhaps not quite as extremely as they do in the movie as it is now, but they have an overreaction, and, that, I think, would still have been really striking, but without being quite as degrading. By the end, you can barely understand what she says. They actually have subtitles for her lines, and she says, "I'm still me. I'm so happy to be here tonight." These are good lines for her to be saying, but it is just, yeah. I think also, and yeah, so while I'm holding up my index finger until you see me lower it, I am spoiling the 1976 version of Carrie, which is also not, I'm not saying the movie's perfect or anything, but if you don't want spoilers for that, and I would say that movie is worth watching at least once without knowing spoilers. I'm really thrilled that I was able to. In some ways, it resembles the ending of Carrie. She thinks it's going to be her big night. There's a bunch of blood spraying, blood covering. In that movie, it's her at first. But after her humiliation in front of everyone, she is able to exact violent revenge against many of them. And that does not necessarily leave us feeling like, they deserved it, or it's good that she did that. Like, I always found myself thinking, like, I understand why she feels that way, but that's, like, humiliation does not mean that someone deserves to die, but it is the culmination. And I think this movie means for it to be the culmination, but the fact that she has no power here at the end, I don't know that it... I think what it means to convey is that a woman in this situation is powerless, and I'm not at all denying that. That is sadly very true, and that is something we have to fix. But without her getting to... Because, like, I get, she does spray them, and we, the last thing we see of Harvey is, like, but it's just not to the same degree. And yeah, I think there should maybe have been, because essentially the only decision that Elissasu makes is to go to the stage despite her appearance. And Elisasu's decision here at the end... right. For those who are listening but not watching, which is perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with that, but I did just lower my finger, so it is... there will no longer be spoilers for the movie, in case you needed verbal confirmation as well as, because obviously you're not going to be able to hear that if you weren't listening. Anyway, the decision Elissasu makes to still go, we understand as this, like, last ditch, like, she just does so badly want to be loved. And I do think it really works how the movie will cut to text, only use once, for example. And I thought it was quite effective that they wrote discard after using, because I appreciate that might be how they would word that sort of thing. But I feel like that's also just how Hollywood feels about celebrities. Once they've used them up, they just get rid of them. But yeah, it cutting to, we are going to, they are going to love you. I understand why she does it. I do think that it is the fact that the character ends like this. It feels misjudged. I think it would have been, I can appreciate having a negative outcome for the character, especially once, she essentially seals her fate with the substance. This was always how it was going to go, and she just didn't quite, we understand why. I empathize tremendously with her, and some of the time with Sue until she starts fucking over Elizabeth, but, I don't think that it needed to be quite like that. Yeah. Okay, I think the rest of this is going to be scene by scene, more or less chronologically, as much as I can remember. I do think it works really well that the very first and very last image of this movie is, her Hollywood star, which, at the very start goes through the actress' life cycle. Who's Elizabeth Sparkle? Get me Elizabeth Sparkle. Get me an Elizabeth Sparkle like, and who's Elizabeth Sparkle? By the end, they're like, oh yeah, she was in that movie. And, this one guy like spills food on it and wipes some of it up. And, we see her standing on it, and everyone is taking her picture, and we love you, and this whole thing. And then at the end, we see her face on it, and it is is washed off with the, and I do also appreciate it's a machine driven by a man. It got rid of her when she was no longer conventionally attractive, and yeah, I thought they did a really great job with the, we only see her do the show once, the Sparkle Up Your Life. But it's completely evident she's great. Like, there's nothing wrong with what she's doing. She doesn't miss a mark. Like, Sue actually does miss a mark. And it seems like, yeah, we'll take 5, whatever. Although, that does turn out to be a dream sequence. But yeah, when she says to Harvey, I have to take care of my sick mother, which is also very telling that that's how she describes Elizabeth, but yeah, Harvey is like, we'll work around it, I don't care. And yeah, the she's got charm, and God, I forget which, but I know there was an actor, was it Jane Fonda maybe, who did like aerobics or something on TV after. Yeah, that that is something that it's perhaps not the thing you most want to be doing. That's another thing. If you've not watched Jane Fonda, like, immense talent. Yes, 9 to 5. China Syndrome, wasn't that her? I think. God damn it! I gotta get back to watching more of her stuff. And the let's see. I think that does bring us to the But yeah, and she sells it. She's got charisma, and I also like that immediately, she's not talking about health. She's talking about appearance. She says, do you want to look like a beached whale, or something along those lines, so immediately hers is a world, through no fault of hers, that, like, she just wants positive attention. She thinks that this is she says near the end, this is the only part of me worth loving. That is like, okay, I appreciate she has made some decisions to, for this to be her world, but she is stuck there now, I guess is what I'm saying. And which like, I'm not saying there's something wrong with wanting to look good. I guess you can probably tell I don't care about it that much for myself. But And that is part of male privilege. Like, it's much easier for me as a man to be like, whatever. Some people are going to judge. It's, that's people who don't accept me for who I am, I don't really need in my life. Regardless, if I did a lot about my appearance, they would hate something else about me. So, I know I rub a number of people the wrong way. I have tried to change. I have reached a point where I am happy with how I am, and people just have to accept me the way I am. I work hard to be an ethical person. I try to live and let live, except for the parts where it is like you cannot put, like, ice. I don't really meet people in person right now, but if I did, who side with ice. If I did, I would not be able to keep my mouth shut. But for women, it is more difficult, and that's not their fault. That's patriarchy. A lot of women want out of that, and it is difficult to do. And every single time you see a celebrity like dressing down, like not trying to be super conventionally attractive, like immediately you have a bunch of male misogynists with way too large platforms, if that's what they're going to put out in the world, just like screaming about how they don't find them sexually attractive, and like seemingly never stopping to ask, do you think they're trying to attract you? Do you think they're like, some of these women, they're not trying to attract, maybe not anyone at all, perhaps not men, certainly not men who would want them only if they look conventionally attractive? Like, it's genuinely like, remember when Jordan B. Peterson, who apparently can't even clean his room, when he tweeted, X'd, sorry, not attractive, and no amount of, what was it, like, re-education is going to change my mind. And it's like, were you just worried that someone out there might think that you were attracted to her? Because, like, I don't think what you have to say about what makes an attractive woman is something anybody needs to hear at all. Like, in general, Jordan B. Peterson, you're not watching this, but if someone who has his ear, shut the fuck up. Nobody needs to hear your judgmental bullshit. Yeah, fuck the entire manosphere. Anyway, the let's see. Yeah, so I guess that does more or less cover that aspect. But yeah, immediately we understand this is indeed a very superficial world. And yeah, I couldn't help but notice that she was nice to, she tells the dancers, you all did great, which, like, there are people in similar positions who do not treat the backup dancers and such well. And yeah, I think we should normalize, like, it shouldn't really be socially acceptable to be a jerk to people who have less power than you. Like, essentially, short of them, like, genuinely doing something wrong, especially if it's on purpose, other than that, you really shouldn't be, yeah, you shouldn't be hard on them. And yeah, she walks down the Kubrickian hallway. Evidently, they work very close to the Overlook Hotel. And she goes into the bathroom, which is also right out of, and yeah, the women's restroom is out of order. So she goes into the men's and overhears Harvey. And yeah, the way the camera's up and you see his mouth, and so horrible. And he's talking about, like, once you're over 25 and she's 50, and you can count the pores on his fucking face. Like, the wrinkles on that fucking thing, like, he looks like a goddamn, what are those called again? pigskin, like American football kind of, yeah. Which again, yeah, I think I've made clear how I feel about this. So I'm not trying to like body shame if you look attractive. I'm saying it's very purposeful that the movie's making sure we realize, this is how he looks, and he's talking about her. She does look significantly better than him, And yeah, I think that is what leads into, we see the poster of her already getting torn down. There's the thing about like how she's no longer going to be working there. Is this when we have the dinner maybe with the, that was also like, see, I think that's one of the things that really work of the gross out stuff, because we're not sitting there thinking like, conventionally unattractive woman, but we're sitting there thinking, oh my God, this Harvey guy is fucking disgusting. And that, I think, that should probably have been the ending there. Like, yeah, shit, I don't know. I heard about at least one Hollywood movie critical of Hollywood where, like, essentially some of the people working there are like fucking cannibals, and obviously it's a spoiler for that movie. It's a twist. So I'm not going to give away what movie I'm talking about, but like, I don't know, maybe the movie does end with like, hypothetically, I already mentioned, I think it could maybe work if, okay, so instead of Sue morphing into Elizabeth, maybe this time Elizabeth emerges from Sue's body, so a reverse of what happened earlier, and they don't want Elizabeth. Actually, yeah, maybe they don't even really say, maybe they just kind of ignore her, and Harvey, maybe others, go up to the clearly now dead remains of, and she looks basically the same. She doesn't look dead. She just, and Harvey and maybe others start consuming her body, like literally like taking bites out of her, and we get that disgusting visual again, and that's how it ends instead, because that's, they are eating her up kind of thing, but yeah. But yeah, I thought they did a great job making his eating completely disgusting, and we see all the food he leaves behind as well. And, he implies, but doesn't want to come right out and say. And she just, asks, what do you mean by that? And then he, fakes leaving, fakes a reason to leave. He has to return some videotapes. You can't tell me that you did not get any Patrick Bateman vibes off him. And, yeah, I really appreciated that, while, yeah, Elizabeth tends to try to be nice to people. Like, she can be a little confrontational, but she's not like a jerk to pretty much anyone, like even, my God, she's way too nice to what's his name? Troy with the motorcycle. That was also something. I mean, I feel like he could probably have just say at least to put on some pants, but I mean, he does grab his clothes, but he runs out of the apartment before getting dressed, and yeah, I think the movie could have done with at least a little bit more male humiliation, especially the ones that are so terrible. I think they should have done more with Harvey, for example. I don't think it's enough that he gets covered in blood there at the end. And yeah, with Troy, you probably should have, yeah, maybe there's an audience for his little E&M streaking down the hallway kind of thing. Maybe he accidentally drops his clothes, something like that, something, because my God, he was fucking awful to Elizabeth. And not even that nice to Sue, like the asshole talking about like, oh, I guess it's your time of the month. Anyway, let's see, so yeah, she sees the poster, her face. I appreciate it's not, that's the first thing we see get torn off there. It is her. It is who she is being discarded. And then she is in a car accident and somehow miraculously completely unharmed. And then we see, as we see other times in the movie, when she expresses vulnerability, a need for people to help her, they frequently men, is it exclusively men maybe? They excuse themselves, you know? Like, it's one thing that he doesn't want to personally talk to her. Like, he might not be qualified for that. He's a medical doctor. He's not a psychiatrist. But, like, you maybe want to slip her a psychiatrist's card? Maybe give her a number to call if she needs help? Something? But no, he just... And it's such a good... he's sitting there talking about, like, oh, you look amazing. And then as soon as she expresses her humanity, he does not want anything more to do with her. And the man who does help her is the younger version of, we later meet the older version of him in the, in this cafeteria, I think it is. Coffee shop, something. And that version empathizes with Elizabeth, whereas the other one, I mean, did he really empathize with her? Or was he just saying, I mean, there's a hot version of you still inside, let's bring that out. Let's, just because you're going to suffer doesn't mean that the world has to be deprived of a younger, more attractive you. And that was also the way that the repeated, we see, it's changed my life. And later we see, changed Elizabeth's life. But was it for the better? And that was also, I wouldn't have hated if the movie had a little bit more of, because when he's sitting there in the coffee shop, he's like, the days are long. It's hard to remember that you are still worth something, deserving. That was really powerful. And I think that, something along the lines of that was, I think that is when, so yeah, she finds the, oh wait, is this when she meets Fred, maybe? I think that might be when she, and again, he sees her, and he's like, oh, we used to go to school together. You are still the most beautiful girl in the world. He remembers her from 10th grade. And of course, she barely remembers him. Like, who still remembers? Like, I mean, if she's 50, that was like... Shit, that was decades ago. What the fuck, man? I'm trying to remember, when do Americans go to 10th grade? They started like 6, was it like 16 maybe? So yeah, like 2/3 of a lifetime ago. And note that he doesn't ask, if she, like, he doesn't talk about her, like, personally. He mentions that she's still the most beautiful girl in the world, and he says, what a career you've had. He also doesn't even mention, like, listen, I doubt it'll ever happen, but if I did come face to face with an actress I really admired, I would try to mention, I thought you were especially amazing in this role. I love that choice you made. Something like that. She's an actress. She's not like a pinup model or something. I mean, you should still treat them as human beings, but they are, for them, it is the appearance, but she's an actress. She won an Oscar. But the thing he wants to talk about is that, and you also get a little bit of creeper vibes off him. It's like, oh, like as soon as she became famous, he's like watched every movie of hers, maybe obsessed about her or something. Because he doesn't really come across, like, he might be the closest to an appealing male character in the movie, but he's still like, and that's just because he's still willing to give her love. That's the closest, that's the best you can do in Hollywood. If a man is nice to you, it's because, it's, as a woman, it's because he, I mean, there's some desire there, that's, because, like, again, if I, 2/3 of a lifetime later, met a girl that I had a crush on in high school, I would not be talking about her appearance. I'd ask, you always said that you wanted to be a doctor. Did that work out? Yeah. And also the detail that, so he writes his number on a piece of paper and drops it in mud. And then just wipes it off and hands that to her instead of just writing it on more paper. So he still, even he does not think that she deserves more than, yeah. And so she goes to, she calls the number for the substance. And I did think it worked really well that throughout the movie, I wasn't entirely sure if they would, but she calls them a bunch of times and they do always answer, but some of the time the answer is not very pleasant. And that felt like, I mentioned a portrait of Dorian Gray. That felt a bit like him checking the portrait kind of thing, which I appreciate they also have that in when, Elizabeth wakes up and sees that Sue took too much. Now, I think that might bring us to the... So yeah, she gets they tell her where to go pick it up. And I also like the fact that she is forced to bend over almost like she's practically putting her hands, almost even her face, on the ground in order to get, because we see no, that's how it is. She keeps trying to get it to go further up. Not gonna happen. She just has to. It's like that time in The Simpsons when, is that a spoiler? I guess I'll just say someone has to beg for their job back and they are made to climb through a doggy door basically on all fours in order to, and yeah, this is, and that's again, if she had higher self-esteem, that's part of it. She really needs better self-esteem. And I'm not judging her. I'm saying, patriarchy fucked her over, leading to too low self-esteem. Because immediately that's the kind of thing of you know what? This isn't worth it. It's not like she spent a bunch of money. We never see money change hands over the substance, which I do think was the right choice because it's not really about that cost. It's not about monetary. It's about emotional and physical. And yeah, so she gets the substance, goes home, reads the directions, and starts using it. And the fact that it's an injection definitely makes us think of... Oh my god. I cannot believe I'm blanking on it. I had it right on the tip of my tongue. I should probably spit it out. It's medical. You definitely shouldn't use it if you don't need it, because now there are people who need it who can't get it. Ozempic. Which, one of the ways that fits really well is this thing of you can't overuse it, and if you stop using it, the signs show. Like so many things that help you lose weight, if you stop, you'll gain the weight back. That is how it works. Listen, I have struggled with losing weight. It is really, really... It is difficult. It requires a lot of dedication, sacrifice. If you think you found an easy way to do it quickly, there is definitely a downside. That, thankfully, I'm not speaking from experience on. Now, let's see. Was that the... Oh, shit, I just realized... Oh, wow. No, yeah, fuck. Once I actually did try to use a quick fix, and I have regretted it ever since. There were no long-term complications or something, but it was painful, and it didn't even really work. So, yeah, that's another thing. This works well as a metaphor for plastic surgery. And I am a big believer in plastic surgery should be the last resort. I am not saying no one should get it. I think if you have been in some sort of burn accident, I've heard that it helps tremendously with self-esteem for people who've experienced that. I just don't think, if you think some part of your body is slightly off and it's something you were born with, or just like if it's not harmful. That's also, I don't think we should obsess so much over our exact weight. Just like I don't. And that's again easy for me to say. I get that, but we need to get to a place where it is shameful to judge someone else for their weight, but not shameful to be overweight. Like if you think someone is overweight to an unhealthy level, I understand thinking that person should maybe lose weight. I'm not really the right person to. I know there are activists. Shit, I used to remember. I'm afraid I simply forgot. Some I've heard some talk about whether or not you should approach a stranger. Certainly, I do very much agree with the idea of, if you are going to comment on someone else's appearance, it should be something that they can fix and preferably easily. And I'm not entirely sure if that applies to weight, because I do understand, while I'm not letting anyone off the hook who does it because they just want an excuse to be cruel, or because they've so internalized the idea that, if you have just a tiny bit extra, weight on your body, that's horrible. Listen, it is more dangerous to be underweight. It kills you quicker, and there's a greater chance that it will kill you. And you actually do have to be very overweight, obese, before it is that much more dangerous than just having an average weight. But a lot of people think that if you don't look like a stick figure, and somehow these days women have to look like stick figures but also have massive curves, like it's completely ridiculous, like porn brain, but some people act like, well, it's horrible and you're a bad person for looking like that. I remember hearing one activist talk about, like, she would go to the gym and people would laugh at her there, and it's like, I'm sorry, what the fuck do you want? Are you not saying that she should look thinner? Because that's kind of what the fuck she's doing right now. She's working on it. Like, maybe it's controversial. I think you should get kicked out and have your membership canceled if you purposefully make fun of someone in a gym for their appearance. Again, other than, like, Nazi tattoo or something. And let's see, I think that does make... But yeah, plastic surgery. So, for a while, the person might look really good, but after some time, it starts to not look as good. Also really appreciate the, I think the body horror of... Right, that was also I guess, shit, was that the very first image? Maybe the very first image was the meiosis? I forget what it's called, but the egg. And I appreciate them illustrating it with what I'm pretty sure was... No, wait, shit, I guess it just looks like it because it doesn't move quite like it after the... But yeah, looks like the chicken's egg, but they have that split, and then they do that with the eyes, like, ugh. Looks like there's a deadite in there, maybe, but yeah, and the younger version comes out of, Sue comes out of Elizabeth, and that felt appropriately unpleasant because that's focusing on, it is horrifying, some of the things people do to look younger and more conventionally attractive. That I thought really worked. And I also really appreciated, like, yeah, for a while she's got, and I thought that worked. At first, Sue does stitch up, like she's just about to puke, but she does still stitch up Elizabeth's body, and then later she starts taking advantage, and that's also, that's pretty privilege. After a while, people start behaving like jerks. Stop that, Mr. Simpson. And I guess but yeah, it made me think of, like, Frankenstein or something, you know. And yes, technically Frankenstein should also be the name of the monster, because Frankenstein's monster is technically Frankenstein's son, thus he would have the same last name. And I think the and the thing about, you know, we see, was it like they're only hiring, you know, girls between the ages, or women between the ages of 18 and 30. I don't mean to be evangelizing, you know, young women. And so she goes to the audition, and we don't even see the other girl, but apparently she was a great dancer, but her face, you know, they don't like her face. Somewhere, Gabrielle from Xena is saying, then don't look at it. And you know, during that we get the close-up of, you know, the guy who, again, like, he's not that attractive. He's kind of average looking himself, you know. And they bring it back later for Elissa Sue. But yeah, you know, she walks in and just immediately, you know, and also, yeah, the spandex, I appreciate the difference between, you know, both of them are technically wearing spandex for the show, but close up of butt. And that was also like, okay, so sparkle up your life seemed like, you know, yeah, this is for, you know, so you can keep in shape, so you can look good for the beach. Pump it up feels like, you know, kind of SFW porn that, you know, like fucking Baywatch or something. Like, nobody's watching this for, you know, the benefits of, like, it's, yeah. And and also I thought they did a great job. So I'm not the best at judging choreography, but the dance choreography there, you know, she's humping the air, she's, you know, shoving her ass up and twerking and all this stuff. Like, I'm not saying that there's no, like, benefit. I'm sure this would tone some muscles that, you know, that a lot of people put a lot of pressure on women to look good during, but this is for, you know, it's to make women jealous and men. Do I have to finish that sentence? I think we'd all be a lot happier if I didn't. I mean, that's definitely what the neighbor is doing, even though he still seems like he has more energy than a lot do after going through with that sort of thing. Now, yeah, and also the way that Sue looks at herself in the mirror and just beautifully, like, I don't know if is it a monitor, or maybe it's like a fake, maybe it's not, maybe there's not a wall, or maybe there's not a mirror there, maybe it's like a window made to look like you know, and so it's like a body double by the camera, because, like, obviously we'd see the camera reflected if that was a real mirror, and there was no digital trigger. I guess it's possible there's digital trickery to remove the camera, but yeah, and the camera is in love with her body, it's in love with the shape of her, and it's, yeah, very, very clearly meant to make us think of, you know, this is what Elizabeth wishes she still looked like. This is what is valued in the, yeah. I like the choice that Harvey he's just the fucking worst, you know? And it is strange to me that the actor went on to, or also played Reagan. Yeah, same year, come to think of it. Both were in 2024. Because he clearly understands for this movie, like, there's no way he did a performance like this not getting, oh, we're supposed to fucking hate this guy. Like, there's nothing appealing about him. But one of the ways that he is so awful is the way that he will, you know, as soon as she says, so scheduling issue, and, like, he looks like, get the fuck out of my office. I am blacklisting you. You know, you will never work in show business again. You know, like, how much like Harvey is he? But Weinstein is he? But the, you know, no, he's saying, yeah, sure. But why the fuck did you say it like that? Jesus Christ, you know, just, yeah. And, yeah, also the part where he takes away the identity of, you know, so her, you know, his assistant is named Isabella, which is also close to Elizabeth, so that is how he treats people like them, and it's like he doesn't even know the name of his own assistant, his assistant. Like, I can appreciate he has to keep track of a lot of people, maybe he doesn't remember everybody's name. His own assistant, like, he's giving her orders day in, day out, he doesn't remember her name, and he's like, Isabella is too long of a name. And that's the kind of thing of, like, hypothetically, maybe you could ask, would you be okay if I called you Izzy? And then if she says no, and she should feel like she can, do that and still be okay. If she says no, then okay, I'll memorize Isabella. It's not that long of a name, like Lilu's full name, for example, before she shortens it. I'm not making excuses for everything in the Fifth Element, obviously. But yeah. Instead, he says, your name is now Cindy. He erases her identity and gives her a new one because that's Hollywood. That's such a big part of it. Like, there are so many actresses we don't know who they are as people because some agent or producer or something said, you have to be like this. This is how people will like you in the public. And then if you make a tiny little mistake, or if you just act different from your characters, like, I appreciate that I don't know, maybe that's not the best example. God damn it. Okay, I don't think, I have not yet watched anything that Millie Bobby Brown is in, so I cannot speak to it myself. I have heard multiple people independently of another say that they don't think she's the best actress. So that is something she's sometimes getting criticism for today. But there was a while where she was getting criticism because her, like, the way she presented when she was not playing 11, I think that's what her character's called in Stranger Things. Her character in that show was different from the way she was when she was like in interview and such. And people were mad. People were mad that she had an identity separate from the one that they liked to see her perform. Like, it's one thing to say, I don't know, I kind of prefer this one, but they made way too big a deal of it. And it's like, I'm a big believer in, if you can't handle that someone is different in real life from who, sometimes plays certain roles, like, it's fine to, there are some who have really horrible personalities in real life. I'm not saying to excuse that. I like some of Liam Neeson's characters well. I did not like when he thought that it was positive because he ended up not doing it, when he said that someone in his life was assaulted and so he went out to try to find a random black person to take it out on. And it's like, I mean, you're just describing racism. You did a racism. That's not, like, it would be one thing if he said, the guy who did it, I really hate him. I wish I could do something to him, I mean, please don't do anything, but I can understand feeling that way. But just a random, like, just, yeah. But yeah, if you cannot separate, if you cannot appreciate that people are different from the roles they play, then just don't watch fiction. It's yeah, so many people end up being harassed online, sometimes even in person. Both are really bad because people can't separate the two. And I'm not talking about separating the art from the artist. That's a different conversation. Yeah, let's see. I guess that does bring us to, yeah, I thought the contrast was really, really well done. How you see how for Sue, it's like wonderful. Her career's on the rise. It's going really well, the rehearsal and such. And then you see Elizabeth, and she's just sitting there watching TV and eating. And it's just, days go on, they don't end, And then Sue starts to, yeah, that was also really, really effective. The part where you know, I love the way that it used stuff that turned out to be hallucination. And it really is like, I don't know if an argument can be made that the very ending is also hallucination. Like, I mean, maybe it does just end with, maybe the reality is that it ends when Elizabeth hits her head, during I mean, yeah, Sue does beat her to death. Maybe that's the end of the actual end of the story, and the rest of the movie is just Sue's brain trying to make sense of reality. Maybe the termination juice took its effect. But yeah, so she's like with this guy, and then nosebleed, which he never seems to realize, which, like, yeah, I wish I could pretend like there aren't cishet men out there, maybe particularly white ones, who, yeah, as long as she came back, that's and yeah, she takes the yeah, and I also really appreciate that's fucking spinal fluid. Like, the guy tested her spine, and it's definitely spinal fluid. And yeah, she injects that, and then the unzipping of the dress, and then like guts start spilling out of her back, and then she wakes up and it's like, oh, it was just a nightmare. And I thought it worked well that it starts slow. First it's just a finger, and then a little later it's a little more, and then by the end her entire body has been transformed. And yeah, this thing of like, Sue parties hard and then doesn't even clean up after herself, and then after a while Elizabeth doesn't clean up after herself, and she leaves out all this food, and she doesn't even turn off the TV, and stuff like that. And both of them grow to resent each other. And that is something, that's a place where it also worked really well. Like, I think there is a less interesting version of this movie where basically it is just straight Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing, because there is an aspect of that, because most of the time it is only one of them who is active, but they can interact with the body of the other, and Sue takes advantage of that. And then there at the end, they are face to face. But yeah, there are, again, because of patriarchy, because of this fucking shallow, yeah. There are young women who find themselves hating the idea of growing old, and there are elderly women who hate young women, including the younger version of themselves. And some of that is, of course, the jealousy that is inspired by patriarchy, where a woman's value. Have you ever noticed how, and they say in this movie, a woman's value starts deteriorating when she turns 25. 25. Age 25, that's when the brain is fully developed. And suddenly, I'm sure completely randomly, suddenly, cishet men no longer find the woman as attractive when she can think independently. And, have you noticed how one of the things that male misogynists scream the loudest about, and there are many, many things, they won't shut the fuck up, is the idea of women having a life independent from men? And yet at the same time, they'll talk about how, it's so terrible how these women just want to build a life with a man. Like, fucking make it make sense. Like, never expect a bigot to make sense. Bigotry brain rot has completely thrown that shit out the window. And I'm not saying you cannot turn back from that. I'm saying you have to make that choice. You have to actively want to be a better person in order to stop thinking those fucking ridiculous things. Just like, yeah. I don't know, maybe I kept it too vague. I'll just briefly, so what I'm talking about is some male misogynist will scream about how, women, they just want marriage. They're obsessed with marriage, and they just want to trap you with marriage and with kids and such. And it's like, motherfucker, you're describing patriarchy, which was not created by women, and it is maintained in part by men. I appreciate that some women do, choose to participate and uphold it, but it would not exist if not for men. And you'll note that a number of women do choose to live entirely outside of it. Some of them, for example, lesbians. and they are also hated by male misogynists. At that point, male misogynists start screaming about how, I can't, this is a potential sexual resource to me that I no longer have access to. It is disturbing, genuinely, how high a percentage of misogynists actually believe in corrective rape, believe things like that, rape is okay if the man really badly wants it, and if he gets her into a situation where a lot of people, rape culture is also something we really have to deal with. I think that does bring us to the, but yeah, she calls the substance and says Sue took too much, and it's simply said, what is taken cannot be given back. Do you want to stop? No. And that's, again, it's a vicious cycle, even as they realize, like, there are women who want out, but they don't take as many steps as they would like because they are afraid of, and that's, again, it's not women's fault. It's not, female nature. I fucking hate that shit. And not just because it's gender essentialism, but when you look at the socialization of men and women, that of women tends to be better and get better results. Yeah, but yeah, there are a lot of women who feel like the only way they will ever get love is through their physical appearance, and that's, what we're seeing here. And I do think it is meaningful that the movie makes clear she is choosing to keep this up. Like, there is a much lesser version of this movie where Sue just takes all of that all at once, without at all letting, because Elizabeth does see, or she sees the finger and the leg before, and I think there's maybe also some of the face, but then by the end, after 3 months, which, like, Jesus Christ, yeah, and I guess that does, yeah, I thought it worked really well, this thing of, like, at first, Sue leaves Elizabeth on the bathroom floor, and she sews her up, which, like, I don't know if she had to do that, and she clearly felt uncomfortable doing it. But then later, she puts her in this, room away, behind, which is completely dark, and she takes out the painting, which I also really appreciate. There at the end, Elissa Sue drags, like, in great pain, drags that painting back, and it's like, I get that she wanted to cut the face off because it's a face off, but, like, you didn't need it there to do that. But she's trying to restore the status quo. She wants things back the way they were. She didn't realize that it was more bearable than this, but the let's see, yeah, and also the fact that, so yeah, Sue, works tirelessly all these hours, apparently 3 days, Jesus Christ, and the guy bangs on the door because he thinks that's Elizabeth, and he's about to shout at her. And I do appreciate, like, that is, like, very little of my life, but a tiny bit, I did have to deal with people who were extremely loud in the adjacent apartments, and that is frustrating. But him, like, shouting at her is just, and the way that, it's disproportionate. And the fact that he, as soon as he sees that it's Sue, who isn't even nice to him, she's just like, what? Did you want to say something to me? Go away, And he's still, like, over the moon in love with her, like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, and also so she takes away the big framed photo of Elizabeth, and she also, and Elizabeth has to deal with day after day seeing the poster, and we find out near the end she can. Is it 2 posters, or is it that there's, like, a reflection thing so she can see it twice? But yeah, and I think that does more or less cover that. And yeah, there's the she gets the present, and it's this cookbook, and she cooks it, and it looks pretty gross, and she eats a bunch and leaves a bunch out, and it really bothers Sue. And that interview where all they talk about is her appearance, and like, how do other women end up looking like you? And there is also the thing about like, where did you it seems like you came out of nowhere, but it's not like, what are your dreams? What do you hope for? They don't even fucking bother with the, do you think world peace is a good thing or a bad thing? Kind of thing that like even, beauty pageant contestants get. Like, just, yeah. And then she's like, it's a town. No, it's a village. It's a farm, just. And the thing about like, well, I didn't really watch Sparkle Up Your Life. And we get, like, I'm so glad Demi Moore has not lost it. When she wants to be funny, she still is so fucking funny. Her imitating, it's a farm. Like, I'm sorry, I was fucking cracking up. She nails it. It's such a, yeah. And yeah, she starts like throwing eggs. Egg is a recurring motif here, and ends up plastering these newspaper. And I also like all of them are also about, hot celebrities and such, And so when Sue wakes up, there's just the entire massive open window, or not open, uncovered window is what I mean. Obviously, it's not literally open, is covered with this because Elizabeth can't bear to see Sue's face there day after day. And that's, again, like, that cost money, that much, that massive of a window, but it doesn't feel, the idea is essentially like, oh, it lets in a lot of light. It's pleasant, you have a great view, but it just feels, there's this repressive thing of constantly being forced to look at the poster, And of course, some people, once they get up in years, or if they're no longer deemed conventionally attractive, they do start just not really going out and maybe even covering up the windows and such. And that's, again, like, no one should be lonely, And that was also the line about, it will just be you again. You will be alone. And so I've seen people question this thing of like, it says you are one. And I think, right, I need to explain, because for a while, it doesn't seem like what one does. Like, they don't even really know what the other one is doing. It's almost like one is in a coma while the other is doing things. But the way I see it is that's where it's, I mean, a lot in the movie is metaphor and allegory. It's clearly not meant to literally be, nothing like this has ever happened or will happen next, not quite like this, and that works for the movie. I think it's more difficult to criticize the shallowness of Hollywood if you don't use allegory. But you could see it as, well, Sue literally is the young version of Elizabeth. So she is partying hard, and once Elizabeth, once the one that they share reaches age 50, it takes revenge on her. She's drinking too much, she's partying too hard, she's staying out and not taking proper care of herself, that sort of thing. And also, the jealousy, which works especially well when they are one, but technically they essentially have different minds, and their bodies, it's only really what one does. Like, the things that negatively affect Elizabeth's body are Sue taking from her body. And let's see, I thought it worked well as soon as they mentioned the New Year's show. Like, from the start, again, it's like, you have to go to his office. He said now. And then she goes there, and it's like, we can't keep you on anymore because you're doing another show. And it's like, motherfucker, please fucking learn how to break good news so that it doesn't sound like the worst news, But yeah, as soon as we hear about that show, immediately we're thinking something's going to go horribly wrong there, because that's how the movie is, it's building up to, there's going to be something big. Now, I think that does cover the, let's see, I mean, I already talked about a little bit. Troy is such a piece of shit to Elizabeth. Like, would he have run her over if she hadn't stepped out of the way? Like, just what a fucking asshole. Okay, so Troy, the thing you're sitting on is a motorcycle. And if you move, if you put your hands on those things that look like they're meant for your hands to be on, if you move just a tiny bit to the side, you can actually drive away without her having to get out of the way. You know, I appreciate, like, you're not the only person who doesn't understand the concept of wheels turning to move away from someone who's standing in front. I know some people who work at ICE who don't seem to grasp that concept at all. Motherfucker. I loved hating Troy. That was, yeah. Let's see. I guess that does basically get us to... Yeah, there was also the ending, you know... sorry, the other hallucination before the ending, but I definitely obviously want to talk about the ending. The, yeah. When the... Yeah, so you have the... Yeah, like a part of the, you know, something sticks out in the buttock region. And, you know, then she goes to look and it seems gone. And they say, oh, there was something bizarre. We should watch. Oh, go frame by frame. You know, she walks. She can't even bear to see it. And she also has to check if she can fix it. And then, you know, it turns out to be one of the chicken wings, you know, that Elizabeth has been eating. So, you know, it is bothering her, even if it is not physically affecting her body. Yeah, I think that does bring us to the ending. Yeah. I did appreciate the title cards for, you know, as we meet these three characters, or is it 2.5, I guess, depending on how you read it. So yeah, Elissa Sue. Obviously, I want to acknowledge, I think that might be the best full-body latex, you know, makeup suit that I have seen since Cronenberg's The Fly. And I really appreciated the Cronenberg influence. Very, very evident in these various scenes. Like, I don't think it's accidental that it is specifically the stomach that she uses to pull out the chicken wing. And then we see, oh, it's fused to her hand, and now she can attack people with it. And, yeah. I think I may have said as much as I'm going to say. Again, please watch the other videos to, you know, about Elissa Sue. And let's see. Yeah, I think I do think there's something that really works about the fact that, yeah, she's so desperate to still please. When she goes to the show, she puts on her own face, not Sue's. Like, there's a poster right out there. And so, I mean, I don't know if she has a ladder tall enough. But, like, hypothetically, I don't know, print one from the internet, you know, there's a way you can get Sue's face on there, but she specifically puts on her own face. You know, she wants people to love her the way she is, and yeah. And I did think the hallucination of that also really worked. And then it cuts and we see her back in the hallway. And yeah, the thing about, you know, we love you, you are irreplaceable. We will always love you. That's what she wanted to hear, you know. And she does ultimately choose also to terminate, you know. And yeah, very unfortunate for her that it says terminate right there on the syringe. You know, she can't exactly try to explain away what is happening. It's very evident to Sue. And Sue murders her. It's not even really a fight. It is just, you know, like, it's physically intense, but she dominates Elizabeth and kills her. And then afterwards, regrets it. And that again works well as an allegory for, and it's not just young women. I feel I don't want to just be targeting, I don't want to be targeting a number of young people. And I'll admit, like, I wasn't always the best at it myself. We sometimes, when we're young, we feel invincible. So we do things that down the line can take a toll on, and yeah, she is trying to kill the idea of her aging. She hates that so much. Because, like, at the end of the day, I mean, just, like, well, let's see, I guess the switch wouldn't work anymore, would it? But I don't know, I mean, hypothetically, could she have maybe just tied up Elizabeth? Like, it's not like Elizabeth is able to do very much to physically, like, if she still wants but yeah, instead, she kills her, and then uses the activator again, and yeah, really, really effective effects. The what makes the special effects especially effective is this, like, it feels real, like it feels like you can reach out and touch it. Now a lot of it is like practical effect, like latex, prosthetic stuff, kind of, I'm not confident, but I think maybe they're at the end where it's just the face and goo. Was that, like, did they maybe have her in a green screen suit? I know that's not literally what it's called, but Demi Moore, because it didn't look animated, it looked real, and then they just take the face and put it in this blob that, honestly, at least when it was moving, I think that might have been a practical effect. They have this technology, that could be a radio controlled, like, I mean, they had stuff like that back when they made The Thing. They definitely could do something like that. I think that does more or less cover. Yeah. The detail that there is this little girl at the show. They are teaching even little girls, this is what you are worth. You can grow up to be pretty, and then people will fawn over you until you are no longer pretty. And, she is traumatized by the events, And also the fact that, does anybody actually think that Alyssa Sue is dangerous? Because she's not doing or saying anything even remotely threatening, and yet they attack her. Because that's how much they hate when a woman is not conventionally attractive. And yeah, I did think that was a very effective. Yeah. Let's see. There's definitely at least one more thing I really wanted to make sure to say. I really appreciated that. Yeah, I did like. That's the thing. I'm glad we don't understand how the substance is really supposed to work. We just learn the rules and then witness what happens when the rules are not followed. Because I don't think it would benefit the movie to get bogged down in... listen, I love a good sci-fi or fantasy explanation for something, but sometimes it just works better to not have it. And, like, in my opinion, it is enough that we understand how it works, and that part of what goes wrong is that Sue refuses to accept, 7 days on, 7 days off. It's not enough for her to have fun. Even though she has a job, it's going well, she's rising. Ultimately, part of her destruction is her own doing, her undoing. And it's not inherently, like, it's not female nature. It is patriarchy. It is show business. It is this system that places only the value on women that arises when men desire them, when there is money to be made off their appearance. Harvey says, he asks if anything is wrong, and she of course can't say, and it's not like it goes well when Elizabeth says something is wrong. And, she is missing teeth, so she opened her mouth to talk. There's no way that they wouldn't see that. Which I also really appreciated, that, the first one comes out without her really doing anything, but then she starts pulling them out. She can't leave well enough alone, Sue, But when she nods at, "Are you okay?" he says, "Smile. Pretty girls should always smile." And that's one of those things, if you want someone to smile, don't tell them to. If you think the context would be okay for it, maybe do something or say something that might make them smile. And then if that doesn't work, just accept that. But like telling a woman to smile is just like the level of entitlement. Like you're basically saying that you think that whether or not she wants to, she should give you that because you're a man and she's a woman and she is beneath you. And it's just such a fucked way of thinking. It causes so much harm. Listen, even if you somehow do not care about 50% of the human population, and I appreciate that misogynists clearly don't, it's causing harm for everyone. Patriarchy does harm men. You have this thing of the male loneliness epidemic, which I want to say it was Dead Domain who pointed out, significant chunk of that is essentially men not knowing how to act around other people, maybe especially women, and that means people don't want to be around them, especially women, and so they're lonely. But that's not women's fault. Like, if you actually sit down and listen to female feminists, like, you would be shocked at how much women do that you would never expect men to do. And it's somehow still not enough for male misogynists because she is either not sufficiently available to them or she is too available. She's too young or too old. I saw someone make that observation on Reddit recently, and they culminated with a conclusion that I thought was perfect. You will never be, you as a woman will never be good enough for a man. So just live your life in a way that you want to, and don't worry so much about how they judge you, which I'm obviously not saying is easy. But again, that was posted by a female feminist. And yeah. But I do appreciate a lot of these problems caused and worsened by men, and it is not as simple as, why don't women just change their attitude? Why don't men improve their personality, behavior, and the way they treat other people? How about that?